Good day to you, my fellow Ghanaians. This is the GH101 report. In this commentary, we will examine Ghana's 40 years under the International Monetary Fund, IMF, economic bailout program, and how it has hampered the country's efforts to develop. But before we delve into the discussion, we will take our theme song and then get back to you.
Arise, gather youth for your country. Your nation demands so devotion. Let us all unite to oppose her and make her great and strong. We are all equal. We are all equal. We are all in building a motherland.
Welcome back. To understand well what we are going to talk about, I will begin by telling you the story of a woman called Davi. It is just past 5:30 a.m. The grey dawn is lightening, unfolding the morning and ushering in the beginning of another day. At a community lorry station, Davi, a woman over 60 years, is already at the square. She is stooped over a pile of rubbish, searching through it, picking out empty water sachets, plastic bottles, and tin cans. She puts them into a large polythene sack she is holding for that purpose. From there, she moves on, going through the neighborhood, walking from house to house, requesting empty water sachets, tin cans, and plastic bottles. Davi's body is bent slightly forward at the waist due to old age and the strain on her waist and knees. She walks long distances every day, making her feet look very dusty, and she has put on flat black slippers, which are worn through to the bottom. She has a headscarf tied over her head. She is wearing an oversized old faded brown t-shirt over a faded dark grey loose long skirt that reaches almost to her ankles. Davi wears clothes like this every day, in which she spends many hours a day searching lorry stations and people's homes for these items, which she then brings to the collectors to be recycled in exchange for a small payment. One will look at Davi and the first thing that comes to mind is poverty, and wonder why an old woman, someone of her age, will not remain in her hometown of Keta in the Volta region, but has come to the city of Accra and is struggling to be able to earn some money to put food in her stomach. The thing is, life for Davi was not always this way. She was thrown into poverty when the living she had always made from making long-handled brushes for sweeping rooms, which she and many of the women made from dried grass straw. Traders came from the cities to buy them from them to sell. This business brought a good income, and from it she and the other women were making a comfortable life for themselves in Keta. Then a time came, the traders who patronized the brushes they produced stopped coming. What had happened? Davi tried to find out from them. Cheaper plastic substitutes of the long brushes they made were being brought to the market from China, she was told. No one patronized the brushes they made anymore. She and the other women lost their jobs and income, and many of them moved to the cities in an attempt to make ends meet and survive. Many Ghanaians living in rural areas have experienced similar circumstances to Davis, where their livelihoods were taken away from them, resulting in poverty. They were subjected to what they do not know to be one of the detrimental consequences of the International Monetary Fund's IMF bailout loan regulations, which Ghana has been subject to on multiple occasions since gaining its independence. One of the rules is that recipient nations must liberalize their trade, which damages their economies because local companies are unable to compete with big international corporations. Cheap imports flood the market when the restrictions that developing nations put in place to safeguard their local economies are removed due to IMF requirements. As a result, many households fall into poverty as local jobs are destroyed and new infant industries are crushed. My fellow Ghanaians, just 3 weeks ago, we celebrated Republic Day as a nation. But do we remember what the Republic Day celebration represents? In 1960, Ghana fully transitioned to a self-governing republic, free from the British monarchy's rule. When Ghana gained independence from Britain on March 6, 1957, it still retained Queen Elizabeth II as its head of state. However, 3 years later, on July 1st, 1960, a new constitution took effect, making Dr. Kwame Nkrumah the nation's first president. We remember his famous speech on Independence Day when he said,
"That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing the own affairs." And my last warning to you is that you all should stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody.
To demonstrate this point, our ancestors fought to free Ghana from British domination and established our sovereignty, which took effect on July 1st, 1960. But guess what? Just 6 years after this monumental declaration, on May 17, 1966, Ghana voluntarily went to put itself under foreign dominion and control again when we signed our first economic bailout program with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, just 2 months after the forceful overthrow of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah as president of the country. This action was so contrary to what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah declared, that the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. Ghana has signed numerous agreements to give the IMF authority over the affairs of our government since 1966, a total of 40 years. Therefore, for 40 of the 69 years that we have been a nation, we have been governed by the IMF, which has directed, regulated, and decided how our economies should be run. Our governments mismanage the country's economic affairs and run the economy to the ground when they are at the red line, heavily in debt as a result, and everything is falling apart. They run to the IMF for a bailout, which it gives them but always comes with harsh conditions that gravely affect the Ghanaian people. In the 2023 IMF bailout program, the government of Ghana received a $3 billion loan facility designed to stop the country's severe inflation, stabilize the local currency, and lower public debt. Though the program successfully stabilized the cedi and boosted confidence, it also required higher taxes and increased utility tariffs, which brought immense financial strain to many Ghanaian households. This has been the cycle our nation has been going through. It were good if economic advancement was what we received from the IMF bailout, but rather severe austerity measures that contract the economy, limit government spending on social programs, and thereby put the citizens under economic strain. From increased taxes they are made to pay and increased costs of utilities, a freeze on employment in government sectors. So we find ourselves with so many hospitals built and completed, but they are not staffed with workers because of the employment freeze, when many trained health workers are waiting to be placed in hospitals to work. On May 15, 2026, the government announced the conclusion of the country's 3-year extended credit facility program with the International Monetary Fund (IMF). This milestone, they said, marked the end of Ghana's financial bailout dependence. No one really cared about the news, for in 2019, the NPP government celebrated the successful completion of a previous IMF bailout program by hosting a Kenke party at the Finance Ministry in Accra, stating that they had freed Ghana from that bondage of foreign control. But what happened next? Just 3 years later, in May 2023, the government went back to put our neck into that chokehold of foreign control again. So when President John Mahama announced at his Resetting Ghana tour in the Savannah region that Ghana's $3 billion extended credit facility IMF program had ended, many people knew not to rejoice over it, for we know that, as it has always happened over the years, our government will mismanage the economy again and will go back soon to the IMF to help to save ourselves. Let's hear what the president said.
We have also come to the end of the IMF program. We inherited the IMF program from the previous government. At the time we took over from the previous government, all the agreed performance indicators were out of track. It meant that the program was in danger of derailment. And so in the first quarter, after we took over, we had to take some stringent action to bring the program back into alignment and bring it back on track. And I'm happy to report that we're able to do that. The first mission that came approved the program, the second mission approved it, and the final mission just left Ghana last week, and they have given us a satisfying mark for performance. It's now going to the board, and the board will release the last tranche of $380 million to support the Ghanaian economy. But we're not going to have a Kenke party, because we believe that it is still work in progress. Unlike others who left the IMF and held Wache and Kenke parties, happy to be free from the IMF, we are not doing that, because we know that our economy still needs a lot of work to be done. And so we've agreed with the IMF to replace the extended credit facility with a policy coordination instrument. It means that every 6 months, we and the IMF will sit down and look at how our reforms are going and see whether we are still maintaining the kind of discipline that we started with, or things are not going very well. And so we'll still have a program, technical assistance with the IMF, but it will not be exactly a program. And there's no bailout involved in this. And it is my hope that this is the last time that Ghana will go to the IMF for a bailout. We must be able to manage our affairs in such a way that we don't go cap in hand begging anybody to come and bail us out.
In the current state of our country's development, this has turned into a cycle for us. We are always on our knees pleading for assistance from the IMF due to the mismanagement of our economy by our governments. Thus, they establish the framework for managing our country. As the saying goes, the person who holds the world also holds control. We cannot claim to be an independent country while continuing to subject ourselves to foreign rule at the expense of our advancement. Ghanaians have fallen into poverty despite receiving millions of dollars from the IMF bailout programs, with rising living expenses eroding the low incomes of the majority of the country's citizens. Ghana has been part of two separate IMF programs designed to stabilize the economy over the last 10 years, from 2016 to 2026. Many Ghanaian households are said to have been forced into poverty. During that time, 850,000 Ghanaians fell into poverty in 2022 as a result of high food prices and severe inflation. More recently, during Ghana's exclusion from the IMF program in late 2024 and late 2025, up to 950,000 more people fell into poverty. It demonstrates that our government cannot run itself if it is not subject to foreign authority overseeing its operations. Whenever our government exits the program, they seem not to know what to do. They become reckless in their spending, especially when presidential elections are near, and let the economy run to the ground, having to be rescued again by the IMF. Our governments have just proved that they are unable to manage the economy without being dictated to by foreign authorities. The IMF program is said to act as a vital financial lifeline to prevent national bankruptcy. Its measures promote removing subsidies, opening ports, and trade liberalization, which they say is aimed at boosting economic growth. These policies are geared towards reducing government waste, increasing market competition, and helping countries trade more easily with the rest of the world. These three core concepts are supposed to work together in the following ways. 1. Removal of subsidies. The government stops using tax money to lower the cost of goods. Governments often subsidize things like fuel, electricity, or food. This costs the government a lot of money. By removing subsidies, governments save money to pay off debts. 2. Trade liberalization, which means open markets attracting foreign companies. It also involves removing import taxes, making foreign goods cheaper. Small local businesses often cannot compete with large established multinational companies. This can cause small industries to fail, and with the influx of cheap foreign goods, local farmers and factory workers can be put out of business. Wages of workers in some sectors of the economy stagnate or fall, widening the wealth gap. 3. Government expenditure cuts. Expenditure cuts that help the government spend less money than they take in. This prevents the government from borrowing too much. It insists on hiring limits to keep payroll costs down, so strict limits are imposed on new hiring and wage increases for public workers. It eliminates subsidies for utilities and petroleum products, combines several ministries to run a smaller, cheaper, and more efficient public administration. The IMF bailout program is not a bad arrangement per se if applied well and for a short period. Through it, nations like South Korea, Colombia, and Singapore have been able to lift themselves out of poverty and turn their economies around. Ghana's persistent inability to make good use of the IMF program stems from the country's underlying issues of widespread corruption, poor management of public funds, and the lack of accountability for public spending. The result is that the government will tell us to tighten our belts whenever we enter an IMF program to help us solve our economic problems. However, while the citizens have their belts tightened to the point of nearly suffocating them, the government leaders have their belts loosened, their personal expenses skyrocketing, and they show no remorse for the suffering the citizens endure. 17 times as a nation, we have gone to the IMF for help to save us. Going to the IMF 17 times is like a patient taking painkillers for a headache without ever fixing the underlying bad habits that causes it. Ghanaian economist Andrew Apiadonkwa made this specific statement to explain that going to the International Monetary Fund (IMF) only treats the symptoms of economic hardship. It does not fix the root problems. Going to the IMF for rescue will continue to be a revolving cycle that will not improve the people's lives in any way as long as we don't address our underlying issues of corruption and government overspending. There will always be harsh measures that will keep the majority of the population in the never-ending cycle of poverty and struggle. This is a GH 101 report brought to you by 𝐿𝐴𝐷𝐻𝐴. Till another time, have a good day.